Hello, and welcome to Thinking Boldly. This is the podcast for the Concilium Institute. I am retired Judge Julie Field, and I am here with my partner and the co-founder of the Concilium Institute, Heidi Webb. And we are thrilled today to have a conversation with the Honorable Kelley Southerland, who is a judge here in Colorado, and she'll tell us more about that. And I'll tell you all a little bit more about who Judge Southerland is and why it's important that you hear from her today. So may I call you Kelley?
Please call me Kelley.
Okay, and please call me Julie. So Kelley, thank you so much for joining us today. We're just thrilled that you're here.
Thank you. It's my honor to be here. I really appreciate being invited to be part of your messaging and talk about some of mine.
So Kelley, I've known you for a few years, but let me just introduce the world to you. Judge Southerland was first appointed to the bench in 2017 in Colorado when she became a magistrate in the 17th Judicial District. For those who are outside of Colorado, that is Adams and Broomfield counties, which is just outside of Denver. Judge Southerland began serving as a district court judge in Adams County in 2023. She has spent her entire career, both in judicial and in practice prior to her appointment, serving children and families. Judge Southerland sees her job in part as making sure families and children feel seen and heard while their cases are pending. Her work off the bench focuses on statewide efforts to support other judges and to continually improve the ways courtrooms across the state provide service to our litigants. So, Judge Southerland, Kelley, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Thank you very much.
So let me just launch with, the first question, because I think people are always curious. What brought you to the bench? What prompted you to do this kind of public service for the people of the state of Colorado?
First of all, I'm more surprised than anybody that I'm sitting on the bench, and it's such an honor every day to do the job and the work. I truly do wake up every day pinching myself, thinking, wow, I really get to do this job. I feel like my path was a little bit unconventional. So often we see people sitting on the bench who come from really esteemed careers in either private practice with big civil litigation firms or long-term DAs who move to the bench or public defenders or, any number of backgrounds. And what we have seen less and less in Colorado over time is a prevalence of family law attorneys on the bench or people who have served in the private realm in that way. And when I was in law school, I really was not even sure I wanted to practice law. I had been educating myself for a long time, from college to then a theology degree, then moving into law school. And by my third year, I was really unsure I would move into the law at all. And I ended up sort of accidentally getting into the child legal representation clinic, and my first day in the clinic, sitting there listening to how the law applies to supporting children and families, I was completely captivated. And that was the day I knew, that was the moment I knew I was going to be moving forward in that world. And that's what I did. I just started truly marching forward into the world of service to children and families. Every door that opened for me after that point was really to that path, and it just became very clear that's what I was supposed to do. So I fell in love with the representation of children, fell in love with working with families, creating peace, trying to build and bring peace for families and particularly children. And thank goodness our state has started to recognize the importance of family-focused attorneys to move on to the bench as judges to serve. So I'm so grateful that I'm here every single day.
So I've got to jump in because I don't have the good fortune of knowing you the way Julie does. And I'm fascinated that you did a theology degree before going to law school. So I'm wondering both if you use that before going to law school or how it informs, or if it informs what you do on the bench and how you see those as integrating.
Sure. Well, my background growing up was very steeped in religion. And as I grew older, and I'm a thinking person, I'm a lifelong learner. So I constantly have questions about what's happening within and without and what's happening intellectually for me. And everything I learn sort of loops back through that lens that we're taught very early in my case. And so I am constantly figuring out how I use my theology training. I really thought I wanted to be an academic, to be clear, not a minister. And so, but the things that I learned, I think most importantly included the way to think about things from a very broad lens. And having that background really teaches about just looking at things from all perspectives, and also brings a sense of humanity. And I do really use my theology degree, but also my experiences as a human, just to the bench every single day. But I continually learn about religion and how it impacts us in the
Mm.
judicial sphere, in the political sphere, in the world generally. And I'm a true believer in the power of separation of church and state, and the meaningfulness behind that. So I don't want to give any sense that that's something different here.
No,
And yeah, I'm
yeah,
just
I
really
didn't mean to imply that in any way that it would have done that. I guess I was more curious about sort of the broad perspective, how humanity, like humanity as with a big H, like how that idea informs what you do every day. Because I think there is not religious in like a small r overlap, but just sort of a sense that the world is bigger than any one situation, or that families, are sort of like a microcosm of sort of the big world, or things
yes.
like that, I think.
Truly, when I went to law school, I was on the heels of my theology education. And so I really did bring that lens into my work in the law. And that was part of why, for the first 2 years until I found the clinic in my third year, I was not really finding the human aspect of the law. And when I did find the human aspect, that's when I thought, oh, there is a place for me in the
Yeah,
law. And I can
that
actually
makes sense.
use my human perspective and my heart to do things that are actually good for people. That's when
Mhm.
it clicks for me.
Yeah, that resonates. That makes sense to me a lot. Yeah, fascinating. I think that's really
So it really seems like there's some guiding principles that you use in your life and in your life on the bench and the work that you do. What are some of those? And I mean, you've talked about, I think, the source of some of those, but what are some of those? If someone were to say, or look at you and say, "Huh, I wonder where this is coming from." What are those guiding principles that you use every day?
One of the things that I'm most clear about is that we're our best at serving other people when we've done some of the work on ourselves. I definitely use my own path through the human journey to understand how people might be feeling and the trauma that people feel coming into the court generally, some of the fear and nervousness facing a foreign system, with us being a very formal legal system and coming into the
Mhm.
court not knowing what's going to happen or what sort of person is going to be on the bench. And so I use that as inspiration to really try and reach out on a human level to everyone who comes into my courtroom, make sure they know they're in a welcome space, that we're here to work together, and that it's not a place to be scared or frightened about what might happen. Rather, there's a resolution and we're going to work together to find it. So that's my biggest inspiration and guiding principle, just to make sure the doors feel open, the process feels open to true resolution from a people place.
You spent a lot of years, it sounds like, before you were on the bench talking to children, working through the Office of Child's Legal Representative here in Colorado. So tell the world a little bit about what that office is, what it does, and then we'll turn to what your role was with that.
Sure. Back in about 2007 or 8, the legislature im implemented the Office of the Child's Representative, and it was the first time our state had a governing body for people who do work directly representing the best interest of children. And guardians ad litem since that time have worked as contractors, generally under the guidance and directive of the Office of the Child's Representative. They're responsible for cultivating the guardians ad litem, training them, managing them in compliance with the Chief Justice directive, appointing them. And so I was very lucky to be one of those guardians ad litem coming under the office very early on. I think I got my first contract in about 2008. And that, again, was the entree for me into really loving the work of representing kids. And so, as part of that, I did that work from 2008 until about 2017 when I got appointed to the bench. And I, at that time, represented the best interest of hundreds of kids and worked tirelessly with many other attorneys across the state to improve the practice of child welfare in the courts and really bring heightened credibility to how we do what we do under a more standardized form of practice. It's been a real joy to work with them both as an independent contractor through my time and in some of the model offices that we did from the years of about 2010 to 2017. And then now I'm on the bench and I'm serving in a juvenile docket as well. So still working with those practitioners.
Can you describe for us a little bit? I'm in Massachusetts, and we don't have an office for designated as you've described. In fact, I didn't know Colorado did, and I'm wondering what the purview is and how that fits into the government structure.
The office is under the state court administrator's office. And so they have an office in the state court administration building downtown. There's an executive director of the OCR who's overall in control of making sure the right people get hired and trained to do the precious work of representing the best interests of children. And in Colorado recently, just a couple of years ago, I believe in January of 2023, became a direct representation model for youth who are 12 and older. And so it provides this dual role of best interest representation for children under 12. And once the youth turns 12, they get to client direct how they want their counsel for youth to advocate for them. And it's just been a really great step forward in representation of kids.
Mm-hmm. That's in the juvenile court, not in the domestic relations court, right? So that for kids that are brought into the system, families that are brought into the system because of allegations of child abuse or neglect, right? So there is a bit of a differentiation there.
In domestic relations, we use what's called a child's legal representative, and that's a statutory role that is designed to have appropriately trained professionals who can also be under the guidance and training of the OCR, Office of Child's Representative. And child legal representatives, or CLRs, we call them, they are advocating for the child's best interests here in Colorado.
I remember years and years and years ago when I was, 40 years ago, being in Scandinavia, and they had an ombudsperson for children. And I was fascinated by this idea because it was something I'd never heard of. And I always thought that was something that should exist in Massachusetts. And we don't have anything close to like an overarching role for, these things are just very fractured, I'd say. Not that there aren't attorneys representing children when they come in to, for abuse and neglect or for through that way, but there's not a specific designated office that, ensures sort of overarching, good practices. And just what I loved about the role, and I don't know if this is true in Colorado, but, it was a place that children could reach out to. So it had, an arm that was, if you as a child were unhappy with what was going on, you could reach out to the ombudsperson who was in charge of children in Denmark. And yeah, a different worlds away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in many ways, right? So you've talked to a lot of kids in your career, both before you were on the bench, and I imagine since you have become a judicial officer in Colorado. So, two questions for you. One is, why do you think judges are afraid to talk to kids? And the second question, how can we get to the point as a society where we are willing to listen to what children have to say?
One, I'm going to start with your second question. My
Yes.
driving passion in my work is really making sure children's voices are heard. And certainly that's in the context of service to the whole family, because if the whole family isn't functioning on a higher level than where we met them as the court, it's not going to work. But really bringing the child's voice into the court is one of my highest passions. And so it is critical that we as a system get to understand how to integrate in a healthy way and be accustomed to hearing about and from children in the court system. So many times families come in and they're especially parents in high conflict, can be so focused on their disagreements with each other, their power dynamic, whatever may be the case in a specific family, that the child's voice is the first one that drops out of the room, out of the proceedings. And, we judges have so much to managing the high conflict dynamic, but also making sure we're moving procedurally forward. But in that, we really need to have a heightened perspective on where is the child, who is the child, what does a child need and want, and are they able to tell us? And if not, what are the ways we can understand that messaging? I think courts can be so shy to interview children because it's not there's there are many ways to do it and many approaches, but there's not a specific formula that's applied in every single case because guess what? Kids are human. They're going through a real dynamic experience. They're experiencing the transformation of their family. Sometimes that's good, but most of the time we know how challenging that is. And so speaking to kids who are in a potentially trauma-laden environment and then bringing them into a court to talk to a stranger, that's scary not only for the child, but frankly for the judge. And so when there's no direct formula about how to do it, people, judges like statutes. We walk a family through the statutory process and the procedure. And then you get faced with this question, my child wants to meet with you, and there's no specific place in the statute to go to tell you exactly how to do it. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we see a hesitation. And then I know so often judges feel like, okay, if I have this conversation, which I might be willing to do if I had more grounding in how to do it, what's then going to happen to that conversation? How do I use it? Where does it go? Who has access to it? And then how do I, as the judge, feel about talking to the child about, hey, we might be having a private conversation, but it's not secret. Everything that we talk about here could be accessed by your parents or by whoever might be a party to the case. And so having those kind of conversations can often feel very uncomfortable. So I think it's a matter of the whole process can feel very daunting, and we don't have a good formula for that.
Mhm.
You got to be kind of gutsy, I think.
Right. How comprehensive is the training for judges around talking to kids in terms of developmental stages, in terms of, what if they don't have experience or background with
Sure.
children?
We're trying to do a better job with that. There are quite a few trainings available. Judge Field and I have actually done one together,
Mhm.
and we have some really good focus on training here in Colorado. There are at least, I think, 5 specific days that I can think of in the state every single year that are dedicated specifically and exclusively to domestic relations training. And there's a whole bunch more training available throughout the year. So there are some great ages and stages trainings. There are some really good trainings available and materials that live online now about how to structure these interviews with kids. Colorado, I think, is really good at being on the forefront and trying to get ahead of educating and training judges in all the ways that really are more and more supportive of families. I'm proud of the work we're doing.
I am too,
Yeah.
honestly, right? I
Yeah.
mean, right?
Right.
Encouraging, yeah, encouraging judges to really talk to kids and to listen to what the children are saying and to try and get underneath. I mean, one of the things that you said is that you really want to find out as a judge, where is the child at? Who is the child? What do they need as a unique individual? So you're really getting past the calendar, which I think is what most judges are obviously, and the parents are concerned with is, what is my Monday, Tuesday going to look like? What's my weekend going to look like, right? People want to know that, but that needs to be decided in a particular context, right?
Absolutely. A child-specific context. Some kids do fine with a pattern 5-2-2-5 parenting plan. Some kids do really well with a 4-3-3-4. Some kids do well with week on, week off. But if you have one
Mhm.
of those kids who doesn't do well with any of those iterations, it's our job to figure out who that child is and what they can do to succeed on a family time plan. They didn't ask for their family, of course, to be separated and to have two homes that they have to move back and forth between. And some kids naturally are going to adapt to this better. But one thing that is very clear to me over the years that I've been doing this work is the better the parents come together and support their child, the better their child will do. So there are some kids who are going to thrive really at whatever family time plan is chosen or assigned to them because their parents can put their supports together on behalf of the child and make it work for them. And some kids really suffer from both the conflict and the schedule. They need a say.
Is there an introduction that you give to people when they first come into your courtroom for a domestic trial or pretrial or some process where you know this is going to be in front of you to make the big decisions? Is there some sort of set piece or guidance that you give to people in when they first come to that place?
One of our colleagues, now retired, had this beautiful uh, pre-trial or initial status conference script that he was willing to share with all of us. And I never got that formal about it because my approach is, and it's a wonderful script, and I highly encourage our judges to take a look at it and use it. But one of the things that I simply do is just bring a clarity, but a softness to the process. It's going to be structured. We're going to get through it. There are rules. Here's what they are. Here's how we're going to move through together. But I expect that you're going to bring a collaborative perspective, that you're going to work hard at looking for resolutions, not inserting more conflict. And that's easier and harder on the continuum, depending on what kind of attorneys or not that you have working with you, depending on the power dynamic that may exist, the existence of domestic violence, which is a tremendous issue in our state generally, as well as in the statutory guidance that we judges must apply. So I just try to set the tone from the very beginning. The more I make eye contact, the more I set the expectations for peace and collaboration, the more I repeat the information that brings the spirit of we are here to solve problems. We are here to try and
Yeah.
restructure your family. We are here to try and help set you up for success after this process is finished. That's really the through line for every time I meet with a family from the first time to the last.
Do you ever incorporate any of that language into your orders or are your orders sort of constrained by sort of the parameters that are just sort of the nuts and bolts? Or do you give sort of, instructive language?
We have some experts in our state called child and family investigators or parental responsibilities evaluators. I'm not one of those. I used to be a CFI. I'm not anymore. But one of the most helpful things I found as a CFI and reading CFI reports now from the judge's chair is that analysis section. Really just having that professional break down or give insight into the family from a critical eye through the lens of their investigation.
Mhm, mhm.
There are certain patterns that those investigatory reports need to follow, but then there's an analysis section, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to analyze in the best way possible with the least information that could be possible probably to try and gain insight into a family because I know the least in the room and I'm aware of that, but there is so much information that comes in through the way families appear in the courtroom, through the things they file. There's a lot of information to be gained. So I try to use that information both in reflection back during hearings to what I'm seeing and hearing, making sure I'm reflecting back and getting that that dynamic with the family so that I understand, am I on the right track here? I'll ask those specific
Mhm.
questions.
Yeah.
I
Love
think I
that.
see that you're really nervous to let your child go with the
Yeah.
other parent. Are you afraid of this or that? Just trying to really understand that I'm getting it sort of right. And then I try
Mhm.
to write orders from a perspective of helpfulness. Helpfulness to the family to go back to the order and maybe see a part of themselves that they, oh yes, we talked about this in the hearing. I did hear her say that I should be
Yeah.
more patient, or if I don't have something kind to say, I should edit myself appropriately. Those. And then also it can be helpful, I think, to families sometimes to read about their own dynamic. And so also I
Yes.
think it's helpful to the next judicial officer. We all move around. We're not permanent fixtures here. And we see that sliver of families at the highest end of the spectrum with conflict. And so many of our families that we're serving, they come back again and again. So to the extent I can leave breadcrumbs as a trail for the next judicial officer not to have to start whole cloth to figure
Sure.
out how we got here, I think that's part of my job too. So I do take that analysis of every family very seriously.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So I have a question. It's exhausting what you do, and I'm sure you do it incredibly well, and you're compassionate, and I hear it coming through. Like it seems like it's the essence of who you are. But I would think at the end of the day, you're needing some care for yourself as well to appear sort of the next day as strong as you did the day before. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about what you do for yourself. Um,
Sure. I am love the concept of well-being just as a general human. Before I even got appointed to the bench, one of my highest life values is just being as healthy as possible. Health is wealth in my perspective. And, we are humans and we can't always have a good day on the bench. And so it's just really important for me to do everything I can to protect my own health and make sure I'm showing up the best I possibly can for families every day. No family can feel trust in a judge who's looking sleepy or grumpy or, we all have our moments, but you also have a duty to try and really show up. A couple of things I'll tell you is that one is I'm very dedicated to diet and exercise and sleep. So those things really matter in my life. I wake up every morning about before 5, get on my elliptical and read my book. I do personal reading in the morning between 5 and 6 and a stretching routine and just try to really maintain that. I eat really healthy. I make sure I'm in charge of my own lunch every day and making sure it's food that supports me and nurtures me so that I can go in and support and nurture others. I also have been on a sobriety journey for almost 17 years and
Oh,
having
congratulations.
thank
yeah.
you. Clarity and focus and real attention to daily recovery, daily spiritual connection with myself, daily connection to what my values are, to what holds meaning for me. That also greatly contributes to my health. I'm a
Mhm.
massive introvert, so I need a lot of time off the bench to recover from the output. But I love it so much that it's really easy to take that time with my puppy and my partner and just go for walks and do all the things that nurture us to come back the next day. So those are some of my tricks.
And so if you're getting up at 5, when are you going to sleep?
9, 9 o'clock.
Wow.
Ideally, not every day, but
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. It struck me that you used a word in describing what you do for families that is one of our touchstones and watchwords at Concilium, which is restructuring families. So that it to me is both profound and useful, I think, to understand what's really going on and what you're doing. Is that a word that you share in your orders or that you talk about from the bench?
I can't recall specifically using the word in an order, though I may have. I've written so many I can't quite recall. But
Sure.
it's definitely a concept that's woven through what I'm talking about, and I certainly have used that from the bench.
Mhm.
And I am very I try to evoke pictures for families in all my languaging and help us all see each other past the room we're sitting in and how they're going to move forward, what that's going to look like, how that's going to sound, what that's going to feel like. Even talking and giving examples of and even role playing at times. Please, practice how we're going to be speaking to each other once we're done here. What are you going to say?
Mhm.
And I give examples of this would be an example of an appropriate email to send. This, not so much. So the restructuring aspect is real, and you can tell you're hitting the note with a family when you see physical changes in
Yes.
people sitting with you in the room, and when they hear these concepts of you don't have to fight, you don't have to choose the fight forever, and when people physically change, you know you've found the note that you need to hit, and that they're willing to start going along on that journey with you, and you just kind of invite them to travel along. I often use the imagery too of your child is not here in this hearing today, but I want you to know that from my perspective, sitting in this chair, they're right here in the middle. I point to the specific place in the well, and for me, your child is right here. I have to look through them to see you, and that's how I want you to see these proceedings too.
Hmm.
Looking at your child before you even seeing me, and I want all your thoughts to filter through what would be good for that little person.
Yeah, no, I love that, seeing that idea of sort of seeing through the child. I see you, sort of the old, not very old. I think it's a African proverb, sort of that I've heard it at least alluded in terms of, I see you as opposed to hello, but I actually, I see you, I recognize you. I think that's really powerful. In the restructuring language that, that Julie and both you have used, have found that people hearing the word, it's almost like a relief to say, divorce. We use the word divorce all the time, and it just has such a strong negative connotation, and it's a failure, it's a shame, there's a sense that that you haven't succeeded at something. But a restructuring is something that you can claim as, volitional, and that you have agency over. And I think that matters a lot for people to be able to say, we are restructuring as a family. And, that doesn't mean that it sort of like discounts some things that are really sad that may have happened, but we are still like working toward creating something new. Years ago, I had a client who was like a mergers and acquisition person. And he was talking about, I used the word restructuring. He said, that's great. He said, that is such a great term because, people think of businesses and they think they either like they tank or they're sold. But sometimes like you sell and you merge and you do other things. Like that's a good outcome too. And it just sort of shifted his ability to think about what his family was doing and his role in that, as opposed to just seeing it as something that was negative. So I love that you're
Absolutely.
using that
And
from
I
the bench.
I love the highlight of restructure the family, because I like to highlight too, you're still going to be a family because you are forever
Hmm.
connected
Right.
through your child. And so sometimes people realize, oh, just because I'm getting orders, or I'm getting divorced, or I'm whatever we're doing here, this is still my family constellation.
100%. And I
Yeah,
think that, that matters even if I sometimes say when people really want to never see someone again, that's if there are children, that's not going to happen. And if
right.
they don't want the relationship to end, that's also, it's not going to be the same. But I'll often talk about a grid. If life were a grid and you were at the same point on the grid, you're not going off the grid. You're just going to a different point on the grid. And, that's, the kind of analogy or visualization, or having people draw out Venn diagrams sometimes about, where they will intersect and where they won't, so that they can sort of have something that is visual that they can hold on to or see, instead of just thinking that, there's a bright line in the sand. I was married, now I'm divorced, and I'm done with you.
Hmm.
And that's what I appreciate so much about work like Concilium's work. It's that helping people, whether it's professionals or families or otherwise, really understand the concepts of peace building, peace creation, family recreation, restructuring, because some of the most difficult times as a judge that I've found are these really highly contentious cases, which, of course, sometimes judges need to decide cases. That's our job. But there are ways to do it in a high conflict environment, and there are ways to do it in an appropriately litigious one. And for everyone, and I dare say attorneys included, the high conflict, highly litigious ones, I think are exhausting for everyone.
Yeah,
And it's
attorneys too.
really it's really refreshing
Right.
And the families come in with this idea of problem solving. And when attorneys come in with this idea of problem solving, it's really refreshing. Everyone's temperature lowers just immediately. The collaboration and the spirit around the case changes. There's real problem solving that happens. That to me is a good use of the system. Of course, we're here to do the high conflict litigation. That's when it's required. But I still, even in those hard cases, I think there are ways to do it that could still be more
100%.
positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I absolutely agree. Absolutely. One of the initiatives that you've really taken a lead on in our state, Kelly, is the bench and the bar connection, and making sure that lawyers have the ability to communicate directly with the court and judges, and to raise any concerns they have, and vice versa, that the courts can and judges can raise concerns with the bar and things that we can improve on. Can you talk a little bit about some of the initiatives that you've led in our state over the past, I think it's been about 3 years at this point?
Yeah, a couple of years. The bench
Yeah.
bar subcommittee that I was appointed to lead is a subcommittee of the Standing Committee on Family Issues, which is established by the Supreme Court of Colorado. So the Supreme Court takes family issues seriously enough to have a standing committee on these issues, and a big committee of us, including lawyers, judges, and other court professionals, meet regularly to discuss the work of family issues in the state. And as part of my work on the bench bar subcommittee, I'm joined by a lot of energetic folk, including you. Thank you so much. And we're working
Sure.
on concepts of keeping the bench and the bar connected. Because, like I was just saying, it's really important for the bar of practicing attorneys to hear from the bench. First of all, one of our missions and mission, vision, and values, part of our mission, vision, and values from the state of Colorado and the judicial branch is transparency. How do we make decisions? And integrity. How do we hold integrity for the law in making these decisions? And so those two values stand out particularly for me in our work in the bench bar subcommittee, because we want to be having conversations with integrity about how we're moving families forward, and we want to be transparent in the way we make decisions. And part of that is understanding how we ourselves are doing that, but also getting feedback and input and giving feedback and input into how the practice of family law is going. One of our current concepts that we're pushing is to try and get regular standing meetings, whether it's statewide via something like WebEx, or whether it's or judicial district specific styles of meetings, to just bring the bench and the bar together and have open, informal conversations. Of course, not specific to any case, but just to concepts. How's it go generally in our district? What changes are you seeing? What things do you need your judges to do
Love
better? What
that.
things do you think your judges don't understand? And
Mhm.
we, in turn, as judges, can share, hey, this is really problematic when we don't get, for example, joint trial management certificates on time, or things like that. We also have, excitingly, a whole batch of new family rules that have already been put out for comment. We're working on revising those, really changing the spirit and structure of how we do family law in the state. We'll really need to have a lot of conversations and trainings when those rules are initially implemented, which I really believe will be coming in the near future. So it's so exciting to me as part of the bench bar work to really have these conversations and keep them going about what we all need to do better. And my focus is always making sure we're speaking the same language and really talking about how we best serve families.
Well, your leadership with that initiative has just been tremendous. I'm just so glad that the standing committee put you in charge of that. And it is truly my honor and privilege to be able to work with you on that and all the other things that we've had the opportunity to do together. Um, I just want to circle back to something that you said when you were talking about your wellness journey and how you take care of yourself. You said you do your personal reading in the morning. What do you like to read? What are some of the things that you read, either for fun or for inspiration?
Okay. So I could talk for a year straight about books and or music. So you ask me about books and I'll try to stay focused. I'm a huge nonfiction fan, but I'm trying to be disciplined and read sort of flip flop between a nonfiction and then a fiction. So I just finished Margaret Atwood's autobiography, Book of Lives. That
Mm.
really great. Last year, I read Learned Hand's biography by Gerald
Uh-huh.
Bempkins, his law clerk.
Yes.
I don't know if you've ever read that, but I was blown away. I didn't realize how much Judge Hand influenced all of the laws
Mhm.
that
Right?
currently apply. That was news to me, and I'm sure legal scholars listening to this podcast will think I'm a lightweight for just realizing that, but it was a wonderful read. Right now, I this morning, I just started Parable of the Sower by
Oh,
Octavia Butler. My
Uh-huh.
favorite book I read last year was called Stoner, and it may be one of my favorite books of all times. It's not about what you think. It was written in 1965, but um, it's about the journey of a man through his life, and I can just say nothing much really happens, but it's one of the most beautiful books I've ever read.
huh.
Highly recommend. Mhm. And it was
Interesting.
actually written another little trivial trivia fact about that book is the author, John Williams, was a professor at DU in the English department.
Oh,
And
wow.
I know
Huh.
this. Yeah, the book came recommended to me, and I ended up digging in a little
Huh.
bit once I fell so in love with it from the very first sentence, and now I recommend it to everyone. So there's my
Ooh, I'm excited to have a new book to read.
yeah, highly recommend.
I think you also said that you have to keep replenishing your supply because you are generous in giving away books that you find inspiring.
Yeah.
Or the
Yeah.
Pima Chardons.
Yes. My favorite books are the Pema Chodron books, and I really do give them away, and I do. I need to just call the publisher and order a, you know, batch of
What are
12
in bulk?
or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Won't
Well,
hurt.
Kelly, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. I mean, you truly, truly have inspired me, and I'm sure you've inspired our listeners. One really quick question before we let you go. Um, what inspires you, or who inspires you?
I am so inspired by the people I get to serve in my courtroom. I am constantly amazed at the struggle that people bring for judges and the courts to solve. What an honor to be put in a position to help people solve their problems. I have no illusion that I solve anyone's problems. And what I'm empowered to do, though, is to help people find their path to solving their problems. When you see people change through the work that you do together in the courtroom, that is absolutely one of the most inspiring things that keeps me going every single day. And people really do bring change to themselves. They really do have moments of realization, and people really do soften and take a new perspective of their child. People really do recover from drug and alcohol addiction. People really do take the help and services that are offered to them at times. And those are the inspirational things that for me, finding a way to connect individually with these with the litigants I serve, with the people who are in front of me, that is inspiring. If I can do that once, even just once more in my career, I'll be completely fulfilled.
That's inspiring. I've just been so struck by how forward thinking you are about the people who come before you. And I think one of the, sort of tragedies of our court system is that, not tragedies in general, that courts look backwards at things that have happened. Julie often talks about this in terms of like one and done situations. But families are so not any of that. It's all about some looking backward, but really looking forward. And to have someone on the bench who can look at people and recognize that this is about your future, not only your history, is just incredibly beautiful to listen to. And I really feel honored to have been part of this conversation. So thank
Mm.
you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Kelly, thank you so much. This is truly been a fantastic opportunity for us to talk with you and hear from you and learn from you. And and be inspired by you. So thank you for all the work that you do on behalf of the people of the state of Colorado, and onward. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you. And thank you, Julie. Thank you, Heidi, for the work that you do as well. Thank you for inviting me into your sphere. And I look forward to collaborating with you in the future and creating and building peace for our families.